From lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota, and 6footmama.com, this is Still Growing with Jennifer Ebling. Still Growing is a gardening podcast dedicated to helping you and your garden grow. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Still Growing, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. Well, could we have a warmer start to November? Up here in Minnesota, it is going to be 70 degrees this weekend, and we're about a week ahead of release time. So maybe by the time the show is released a week from now, we will start to feel like it's really November. But right now we don't. We feel like we have an extended summer here. So I did what a good gardener should do yesterday, and I went out to my garden with my camera and I took pictures of things that were blooming that had no business still blooming their hearts out. I had annuals, pots of annuals. My herbs look fantastic. They look like they're still in the prime of their lives. So it was just really fun to be out there. I had a bonfire going, got the fire pit all ready to go for winter. And man, what a pleasure. So anytime we get an extended season in Minnesota, when our season is usually about 4 to 5 months in most years, this was just a true pleasure. So I hope that you're enjoying an extended season in your garden as well. And don't forget to get out there with your pictures, because we're just about to the point where we won't be able to do that much longer. And then all bets are off. Then you're relying on your memory to save you. Well, I want to begin by welcoming new members to our Still Growing podcast group. That's our listener community for our show, for the Still Growing podcast. And new members this week include Peter Langham, Pam Forsman-Mead, Christine Chandler, Deb Forrestal, and Joanne Shaw. And Joanne is a fellow garden blogger. I actually met her at the Garden Bloggers Fling this past July in Minneapolis. And Joanne not only has her own blog and her landscape design company, but she also has a radio show that she does on Mondays. It's called Down the Garden Path, and it's on Reality Radio 101.com. And if you don't listen live, you can always go to Joanne's website and listen to past episodes there. And her website is at down, the word down, the number 2, and then the word earth. So down to earth, and then .ca, because of course she's up in Toronto, Canada. But Joanne does great work up there on her show. So if you're looking for another fun gardening show to listen to during your week, go ahead and check out her show. Anyway, welcome all of you to the Still Growing podcast group. And if you are listening right now and are wondering how you can join the group, all you have to do is go to Facebook, type in the words Still Growing podcast group, and our group should pop right up. The other option is you can go to my website at 6footmama.com. That's the number 6, FTMAMA.com. And I have a link right there to the Still Growing podcast group. And then all you have to do is request to join. And as soon as I verify you're not a spammer or a robot, you'll be in the group. Now, being in the group is important because not only is it a place to interact with other listeners of the show and interact with some of the great guests that are on the show, like Deborah Madison of Vegetable Literacy and Anna Thomas of Vegan Vegetarian Omnivore, Joel Karsten of Straw Bale Gardens, but it's also where you can win some of the great giveaways from my guests and sponsors, and it is the only place where I select people to win those things. So make sure that you get in the group, check it out. And this week's winner of Marta McDowell's All the President's Gardens, Marta generously offered one of her books to a lucky listener. And the winner this week is Danny Perkins. Danny, I saw your post right away this morning, how much you enjoyed listening to the episode. And so we decided to give you the copy of the book. And I know you're going to be just thrilled. So congratulations, Danny. I know you're going to enjoy the book. And thanks again to Marta McDowell for giving us a copy for our giveaway. Now, the group is also where I curate content during the week, things that I want to share with listeners of the show that I think you'd find informative or entertaining. And this week, I have a couple of crazy recipes that I think you'll enjoy. The first was shared on Bravo, and it's a sandwich that Tom Colicchio has come up with, and it's a kind of a spin on his butternut squash ravioli recipe, and he's come up with a butternut squash sandwich. So if you are a squash lover, and I happen to be, in fact, I love Panera's squash soup. It's one of my favorite things of fall when I go out to eat with the kids, which I have to do a lot during basketball season. I love to get their squash soup. Well, Tom Colicchio has come up with this squash sandwich. So squash on a sandwich? Absolutely. And here's how he does it. He takes sweet squash and then puts a layer of white mozzarella and hazelnut brown butter, and then joins that all together in a panini press for a warm, crisp, melting, delicious combination. I thought it looked fantastic. So I'm sure it's very ooey gooey, but it could be a grilled cheese substitute in my mind for fall. So give that a try as something new for this fall. And the other thing that I shared was a very unique spin on roasting pumpkin seeds. And this is, are you ready for it? Bacon roasted pumpkin seeds. This was shared on the Gunny Sack's website, the Gunny Sack. And what they did is they roasted pumpkin seeds. They took pumpkin seeds out of their pumpkins, and then they spread them on a baking sheet. They sprinkled them with kosher salt and then cut up 4 slices of bacon into little tiny pieces and placed them all over the pan with the bacon. I think that sounded pretty darn good. So something really fun for a party. I think at the end of the post, she was talking about how she was trying to save some for her husband when he got home, and she couldn't hardly keep the kids away from the pumpkin seeds. So anyway, I thought it was a unique spin on pumpkin seeds for this fall. The other thing I wanted to share with you as podcast listeners is this new podcast that Susan Vollenweider of the History Chicks podcast had shared this morning on her Facebook feed. And it's called The First. It's a podcast that is all about the stories of invention and their consequences. So I'm going to read from their website here, but if you're like me and you love podcasts, it can be tough sometimes to find a new good podcast that you really enjoy. This one is extremely promising because it's a new podcast series from Greg Young of the Bowery Boys. So he's already doing a great podcast. So right there, you know that another production by the Bowery Boys is going to be great. And they are examining the birth of inventions and the people whose lives were affected by the inventions. So it looks like he's got 3 episodes already up. It's a history program. It's a history format show. So if that's something you're interested in, you should love this show. And the episode that I just started listening to was their 3rd episode out, and it was all about Dorothy Draper. So give it a shot. If you're looking for a new podcast, just search The First. And I hope you enjoy it. Well, for today's show, I'm speaking with Katie Dubow. And in addition to being a marketing strategist and speaker in the gardening industry, Katie serves on marketing committees for both the Garden Writers Association and the National Initiative for Consumer Horticulture. Katie is a seasoned marketer. She has held positions at Liz Claiborne and at CBS in New York. And now she's working in her family's business at the Garden Media Group. And they're the folks behind the Garden Trends Report, which is the purpose of today's show. I was so excited to have Katie come on and talk to us about the 2017 Garden Trends Report. The theme of this year's report is Grow 365, and the report highlights 8 different trends that are designed to inspire clean gardening 365 days a year. In fact, this new report is highlighting how new changes in indoor gardening technology, combined with an ever-increasing demand for clean food, is making it easier than ever to garden 365 days a year. The report is always full of surprises and fascinating tidbits, and spotting trends is an art. It's not easy, But today, Katie gives us a peek behind the scenes, what it takes to put this report together, and then walks us through Grow 365, the Garden Trends Report for 2017. Well, hello, Katie.
Hi, Jennifer. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited too because I have wanted to get someone on from Garden Media Group for a while to cover the Garden Trends Report. And we're going to be going through the 2017 Garden Trends Report. It's hot off the press.
Off the press, right.
A fantastic opportunity. And before we start chatting about the report, why don't we have you tell us about yourself and what you do for your company, Garden Media Group?
Well, sure. So thanks again for having me. I'm really excited to talk about our trends report today. Garden Media Group is a second-generation business. My mom, Susie McCoy, started it, I'm not going to say the year, but back when she put me on the bus to kindergarten. And since then, it has just boomed and been a wild success. Now we are a full-service boutique PR firm. We work with clients in the lawn and garden industry, and we have like-minded clients, so people that we like to think are doing the right thing for the environment. A lot of people would imagine all garden companies are, but we like to choose just the best. And so we work to help them build their reputations, get their word out, really reach their customer in the way that they want us to. And of course, we put together our trends report, which is one of the most widely read in the industry, and that's just been a lot of fun for us because it helps our clients, it helps retail businesses, and it helps consumers just by staying ahead of the trends. And so that's a really fun part of what we do.
And how about yourself? Tell us about yourself.
So I started working here for the second time around. The first time I was about 6 and I was licking envelopes, and stuffing them when we used to send out press releases via the mail. But I started here about 5 years ago again, and I moved back we're in Kennett Square, which is where Garden Media is located, which is, we like to call the garden capital of the world, actually. It's a really fun place
Where is Kennett Square?
Kennett Square is in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It's the southeast of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And we have 30 public gardens within 30 miles of Philadelphia. So
wow.
It really is a green, rich community, and a lot of people from the industry come here just on vacation to travel and see our gardens. So we get a lot of people coming in and out of our office. I have a daughter. She's 2, and I'm getting her cooking. I'm getting her picking tomatoes in the garden and already nurturing that second generation of a gardener because we know how important kids are in carrying on our mantle. So that's just been a really fun activity for us at home.
Well, that's lovely. I do the same thing with my 4. I don't force it on them, but I do try to weave them in to the garden whenever I can, whether it's, go pick some greens for, a salad we're going to make for supper, or especially planting. John's always around if there's, planting radish or planting anything. He's always fascinated by that.
Oh, that's great. And with 4, that's a lot of free hands.
It's a lot of free hands, but I tell you what, my secret is I hire student gardeners because, the gardens are a lot of work, and I have a huge garden. So every year I put together a big team of student gardeners, and we work really hard. So, but it makes a difference. And then I have enough gas in my tank left to come in the house and make supper and all the things that I need to do. Otherwise, you can really run yourself ragged out there. So, well, hey, the Trends Report is so anticipated every year. I know for myself, I've wanted to talk to you guys for a couple of years now, so I'm so thrilled that it's actually happening. And this is something that you guys have done since 2001.
Yes.
That's a long time.
I know. It is. It's hard to believe that it's been that long. We look back over past Trends Reports, and, people will talk about vegetable gardening or fairy gardening. I'm not sure if you're into that.
Sure.
But these are things we predicted years before they happened, and it's really fun to go back. In fact, on our blog, we have a look back, and we look back at our past trends, and we say, in 2004 we predicted fairy gardening, and look where it is today.
Wow.
So it's fun to look back and see that some of the things we predicted, most of the things we predicted, actually do come true.
Wow. Well, how much work actually goes into producing this report, and how is it that you're able to spot trends?
Yeah, it is a lot of work, and I appreciate you asking that question. It's something that takes us about a year to produce. So we have just wrapped our 2017 report, and it's like a garden, actually. You're never really finished. And so comes a point where we have to say, okay, we're done. I spoke on Saturday. I presented to a group of garden industry professionals. And so we had to be finished by Friday. And Friday morning, we were finished because it's a process that can really never end. So it does take us about a year. And so now we're already starting on 2018.
Wow.
And it's a long process. And what we do is, we collect information on a global scale. A lot of trends start in Europe, and particularly in this country, a lot of trends start on the West Coast. And so what we need to do is we need to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on, and not in gardening, in fashion, in home decor, every industry, technology, particularly now with technology in the garden. So we subscribe to the magazines, we look at all the trends reports, we follow podcasts of people that we admire, and we collect that information over the year. And then we talk to some of our trusted media sources and the garden experts. We interview them to see what they're seeing. We talk to some of our clients to see what kinds of new products that they're seeing their consumers are wanting that they're coming out with. And then, of course, there's a little tea reading, little crystal ball reading. And like you said, since 2001, Susie's been doing this, and our team here has been predicting trends. So we have to just learn to trust our instincts and say, yeah, this is something that we can feel is going to be a trend based on this research and then based on our instincts.
What an interesting combination of things that you're doing to put this together.
Yeah, that's why I think it takes a year, too.
Yes. When you are putting together the report, do you think of like a term or a phrase or a title for this every single year? Is there some type of mantra then that becomes the saying for that year?
Yes, absolutely. And one of my colleagues' claim to fame is she's come up with the title for the last 3 years.
Oh.
So it's a big deal in our office because it sets the tone. It's something that we use in all of our press releases. We use that title over and over and over again, and it becomes something that represents the trends report. So it's separate from the report, the content and the meat of the report. It really needs to wrap up the report, but give, like a title of a book or the type
yes.
of email subject line. Those kinds of things introduce the reader to what they're going to see, and so it is very important to us. We do spend a lot of time trying to, whittle it down and come up with the perfect little combination of words.
Well, the pressure's on, right? You've got to see if you can come up with the winner here now.
Yep.
This year's title is Grow 365.
I love hearing you say it. What that really embodies is that we're in this industry, and when our business is good in public relations, we know that the garden industry is doing well.
Oh.
And so we do see a lot of growth to come in this industry. But the biggest growth that we see is when gardening can, we're in the many regions, particularly where you and I both live, it's a seasonal type of activity. And we think the biggest growth in our industry is going to come when we can interface with all 320 million Americans in this country year-round, when everybody can garden every day, anywhere. And so that is going to be an opportunity for gardening to be more relevant. And, that's what our category needs is relevancy in people's everyday lives. We need to be necessity. The term plants aren't just a pretty face, something people say in our industry a lot, but it's true. And we just, I think as more people realize, and we'll get into this with the trends report with each trend, but people are realizing the importance of where their food comes from, and it's going to all come back to horticulture.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Now, do you guys hashtag your title then throughout the year as you're seeing things that kind of support what you're seeing in trends? Is it hashtag Grow 365?
We do use Grow 365, but we also use Garden Trends because that we have seen is a little bit more of a wider use. So we use Grow 365 personally, but Garden Trends gets us, the biggest bang for our buck.
Okay. So if listeners have something that they think is a trend, they should just hashtag it Garden Trends, and you'll probably see it.
We absolutely will, yep, and we'd love to, share whatever anyone else is seeing. We'd love to share it.
Okay, that's great. Well, out of all the constellations of options available, it was a beautiful crop of succulents that made the cover of the report for 2017. And that made me happy because, of course, they're one of my favorite plants. I think for so many people, right?
So
they're
many
just,
people.
they're, well, semper vivum, right? Always living. They're fantastic. What prompted that choice for the cover of this year's report?
Well, I think you just wrapped it up. I mean, look at it. It's beautiful. And then it is the superstar plant of the decade. I mean, it has, you probably can guess that we predicted that to come, but succulents are so low maintenance. They're so easy. They're everywhere. And, they really bridge the gap between gardening and home decor. You see every lifestyle publication, any shop, even fashion. Succulents are on the runways. Succulents are everywhere. So it is something that will help, like Grow 365, it sets the tone of the report. People see that and they can easily identify with it and see that's beautiful. And so they're interested in reading more. They want to turn that page.
They do. And that whole industry around succulents has really grown into home decor because I know for myself, I recently just bought a ton of fake succulents because in Minnesota in the winter, you can't bring those things indoors.
Yeah.
They're not going to thrive. Yeah. But I love the look of them so much that I was buying these artificials going, oh my gosh, the artificials now are so good. You can't tell them apart from the real ones.
Yep. I know. I look with envy at the West Coast or the southern landscapes who have them year round.
Oh, I know.
But they don't get as much water as we do, so
True.
There's a balance.
Always a trade-off.
Yep.
Well, let's walk through the 7 main points that make up the Garden Trends Report. And the first trend has to do with something that you refer to as peak season. How has technology affected our ability to grow 365 days a year in a sense, making every season a peak season?
Exactly. Well, that's the word we love is peak here is our key word because there's so much to do with that word. You don't have a peak season anymore. You're harvesting your vegetables at their peak of their nutrition. So there's a lot of which helps you become the peak of your personal health. So we really love the many aspects that word conveys. But the idea of growing indoors is that you control the conditions instead of Mother Nature. And that's just a big aspect of gardening. Technology has enabled these products to be self-watering, which, was the number one reason people kill houseplants is they overwater them. Yes. So these units will do it for you, or they'll measure whether your plant needs water, how often you should water it. They'll fertilize for you, or they'll let you know when you need fertilizer. A lot of people don't even know that their houseplants need to be fed. So it's really, the technology has evolved so much that we can grow more successfully, but also more efficiently. And I think that with this trend, this global real estate trend, people are downsizing. The McMansions are no longer, this is 5 years old news. People are no longer really living in McMansions. They're living in smaller spaces.
That's right.
And so if we want them to keep gardening in their lives in these smaller spaces, we're going to need to have new technology and new systems that can help them do that.
Well, and bring the small space gardening indoors, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so there's a product from a company called OPCOM Farm, and it's called a GrowBox. And you open it, a couple snaps will open the arms, and you fill it with water and press a button. And we're calling these systems plant, pick, and plate because that's all you need to do. They do the rest for you. So it's one touch of a button type of growing that is really, the information really has just exploded. And it's you asked about technology, but it's not just the technology that's exploded and helping people garden more successfully. It's the availability of information like your podcast, like YouTube. You really can find so much information on the internet now that anybody can learn to grow something that they want to grow.
Your point is valid, and we're also able now to kind of debunk some of the garden myths that have been circulated, where before I think it was harder to do that because you're trying to find good quality information about growing. So
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the next trend is a favorite of mine when it comes to the life-giving benefits of connecting with nature, and it's something you call wellness hotspots. This whole area is really a counterpoint to our high-tech lives, which is another reason why I love it. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, last year's report, we actually we talked about finding bliss in nature by being disconnected from technology. And this year, what we're really seeing is that, people are not going to get disconnected from their technology. Their phones are attached to their hips, and so we need to learn how to incorporate technology into, people's lives while they're still in nature. I think that the Pokemon Go craze might best exemplify this. How can we get people outside?
Oh, you're right. That's a great point.
Because we know the research shows people just the benefits of being in nature. Whether you're looking at your phone or not, I'm not here to debate that, but just the benefits of being in nature are tremendous. From whether they're sitting on your desk, they're in a nursery, or you're actually standing in the woods, and we call that forest bathing, which is a very old Japanese term. Have you heard of that term before?
I have. I think about it a little bit like feng shui, because the first time you hear the term forest bathing, it sounds a little strange. It's something that people aren't very familiar with. But literally, it translates into the medicine of being in the forest. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it with regard to this trend?
Yeah, well, forest bathing is actually an old Japanese term that's been around since the 1980s. And it's one of their cornerstones of preventative medicine, actually, in Japan. And to us, we see it as, I was actually at a wedding this summer, and the person officiating the ceremony said, before we get started, I want everyone to take a moment and appreciate, it was at an arboretum, take a moment and appreciate the forest bathing that we will have during the ceremony. And I thought at that point we had already sort of identified it, and I thought, wow, we're talking about this here, and no one really knew what he was talking about, but I was thrilled to hear that. And it's just the concept of spending time in nature, which reduces your stress and increases your well-being. And what we're seeing is, yoga is something that came from Asian culture, and now it's completely mainstream. We think forest bathing will be the same kind of concept in the next 30 years.
I agree. I mean, there's no doubt that we need to spend more time in nature as our world becomes more and more high tech. One of the terms that you also mention in conjunction with this trend in the report is soundscaping. I'd never heard of that before.
Yes, so that is a new term to me also. This research comes from a man at the Davey Tree Expert Company named RJ Laverne. And he's doing a PhD thesis right now on soundscaping. And what he did was he researched, there is a bug called emerald ash borer that is devastating ash trees in our country.
That's right.
And so because of this widespread chopping down of trees that's happening in urban communities, because the ash tree is one of the most widely planted street trees in urban communities because it grows fast, it grows tall, and it's pretty relatively inexpensive. And before now, it's had no pests. But so these communities are having to take down maybe 75% of their urban tree canopy. And so he decided to look at what that does to the noise levels in those communities. So when you take down those trees, it does seem obvious to us now that we're talking about it, but of course the street traffic volume goes up. You hear more sirens, you hear more horns honking, and you hear less birds. And what that does, his research has proven to show that decreases our overall quality of life. It increases stress levels, and it affects our mental health, but most importantly, what he has seen is that it decreases our ability to focus. And so, in a big city like New York, where you barely hear a bird chirping, your ability to focus is greatly decreased.
The whole focus on audio and combining audio with focus. There is that one app that came out a few years ago, and it's called Focus at Will. I don't know if you've heard about it, but if you download this app onto your phone, they have studied what sounds help people attend to things with more clarity and purpose. And that's what this whole Focus at Will app is about. So if you download it, they have a number of free songs that you can listen to that if you're playing it, it will help you focus while you're working on homework or something in the office. I used to play it for my kids when they were doing homework. And you can pick like classical music or nature sounds, but they've engineered it to help you focus, to enhance your ability to focus. And this sounds so much like that. That's fascinating. What's that gentleman's name again?
RJ Laverne with the Davey Tree Expert Company.
Okay.
Yeah, it really is. And he actually hasn't even finished. That research is happening right now because he, as communities are affected across the country from emerald ash borer, he goes and he visits new communities to see how it affects them. So I do believe that his research will be wrapped up in 2017. So that's something I will keep your listeners posted on.
Oh, that'd be great. You know, there's another part of your report under wellness hotspots that has to do with trees, and that is something that you call nature sunscreen, because trees provide more than just shade to keep people in homes cool. They're actually minimizing the harmful effects of UV rays on the skin. So you're referring to trees as nature sunscreen.
Absolutely. Yeah, you know, sometimes in the garden we see beautiful plants and flowers, but we tend to ignore the trees. And so we try to really look at there are so many benefits of trees. And so what we try to do is help people, you know, think about what's important to them. Now, wrinkles are certainly important to me, but, you know, skin cancer is the number one cancer in our country.
Yes.
So it's so important to protect ourselves from the sun. And trees help us do that. And so we're calling them nature sunscreen because it helps people make a connection between their own personal health care and these trees that we're planting in our gardens. So that's something that's really hit home outside of the garden industry when we talk to, you know, people who might not necessarily even have a garden. It helps them see trees for some of their real, true benefits.
That's great. Well, I have to admit that I'm a little wild and woolly when it comes to my own garden. So when I read about Trend 3, I got a little tense because the title is Tidy Gardens. And I cringed just a little bit because it reminded me of the whole decluttering craze for the home. And then sure enough, I look and you're referencing that book about the Japanese art of decluttering.
Yes.
And
have you read it?
I haven't. I have read excerpts and I've heard about people talking about it. And I think one of the things she recommends, right, is that you get up and you have a clean sink every day or you make your bed every day. There's something you do to kind of set the tone. And the minute I heard that, I'm like, oh man, I am so out of there because with 4 kids, I wake up every morning like I'm going to war. It's like I get up, somebody's usually screaming at me to get up, and then it's like, Mom, we've got this and this and this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And we hit the ground running. So beds are not made around here, and the garden gets a little out of control at times. But it is a trend that you're seeing. You're seeing this decluttering now go from the home to the garden. People want tidier spaces outside.
Yes, and certainly to be clear, this is not for everybody. I think the success of her book shows that, though, to me, you know, tidy gardens doesn't have to mean trimmed hedges and clean corners.
Yes.
But I think what the success of her book shows is that people are simply looking for reduced consumption. You know, we talked about this downsizing trend and small spaces. And so people just don't have as much stuff. And if they do, it's becoming a bit of an issue for them. And so it's really just in finding that peace or finding that bliss in having experiences and not necessarily in your stuff. So, but again, might not work for everybody. But when we saw, and you know, in our office, we've gotten her book and we've read it, and it does not work for everybody because it requires a lot of discipline.
Yes.
But there is something to be said for the success of it. And so, if people are looking for that on a global scale, then how is that applied to the garden? And so, we did come up with a certain number of ways that, you know, we took what her pillars were, and that is, you know, you have one hairbrush. Why do you need 6 hairbrushes? So how can we translate that into the garden? And, you know, we really did think that it related.
I love that. So you'll even look at current books that are popular and then extrapolate that into the garden.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's taking those trends that are outside of our industry and seeing how they relate to our industry. We'll talk about one that's actually my favorite in a little bit. But that's really that's the key to it, is that our industry is not a silo.
No.
How are what other people doing successfully translate to help make our industry more successful as well.
I love it. Well, and for people who are interested, this book that we've been referencing is by Marie Kondo, and it's called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And so
it's very small.
It's a very little book, but
Yep.
it has been referenced a lot. So if you haven't heard about it, that's the book we're referring to. So then when you were creating your pillars for Tidy Gardens, that was kind of echoing her pillars for tidying up. So why don't we have you walk us through the 8 pillars to tidy up garden spaces? By the way, I think these are all great reminders.
I'd love to, and I hope you don't cringe throughout them.
You know what? I don't. I think when I first heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me now that I have to do? But then when I saw what you're suggesting, I actually do these things. Or I do a pretty fair amount of them, I should say. And there wasn't anything on here that I heard that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. But it's a good reminder of, tips and tricks that you can do to make your space look better.
Yes. And number 1 is clear out the clutter. And so I think that, particularly garden enthusiasts, they keep and think that we can keep alive anything. And we'll save it just because, maybe someone gave it to us. But if a plant is dead, you need to get rid of it. And you need to get rid of things that you don't need. You have 6 pruning shears. Get rid of them. So clear out the clutter is number 1. Number 2 is something that she talks about a lot in the Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, is keep what you love. So you really have to take a hard look at it and say, how does this make me feel? And so what we did with that is we said, okay, keep what you love, but also what loves your garden. It's the concept of right plant in the right place. Sometimes it may have been a great plant, but you just didn't have the right soil, or it wasn't planted in the right sun, and it's not doing well. And so, get rid of it. Plant the right plant in the right place. The third one is out with the old, in with the new, so purging plants that are past their prime. Or, we all have planted something a few years ago, and it's now outgrowing its space. Divide those plants. Give them space to grow and space to thrive, and give them to your friends who might need to, start their own garden.
That's a great tip.
Number 4 is thin your garden. And so it's about getting your plants under control. And so it's kind of the concept of dividing, but also the concept of if you haven't pruned those hedges, maybe they could use some pruning, just to make it look good, but not necessarily to make everything look like a formal garden. The next one is to eliminate harmful synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. And so this goes back to our clean garden concept.
Yes.
And so there are a lot of alternatives and options for people. They don't have to use chemicals. So often these chemicals are overused, in fact, and we use too much of them because in our society we think, oh, well, more is better.
Yes.
And so, it's not necessarily that the chemical is bad, but maybe we're just using too much of it. It's running off into the water. So one of those clean and tidy concepts we're saying is just, go natural. And then respect your belongings. So you've chosen the best. You've chosen only what you love. Now take really good care of them. You keep your tools looking good. You keep your plants healthy. You really have your best garden face forward. And the 7th one is to create some boundaries and define spaces. Now this is, you have a little garden next to your seating arrangement that could be a bug repellent garden. Or you have something at your entryway that is, when you rub against the plants, they all have a very welcoming scent. So again, it doesn't have to be very clean corners. It's just that you're creating very specific spaces for specific purposes.
I love that.
And then,
I just had interviewed Tara Nolan, and she's the author of Raised Bed Revolution.
Yep.
That's one of the points that she mentioned, and I think when people think about raised bed gardening, they don't always think of the clean lines that they get when they go to raised bed gardens. So that's a great way to quickly organize your garden space.
And raised beds are so much easier because you get to put all your own healthy soil in there. So that is a great point. I love Tara. And then the final one is to use a restricted palette of plants and hardscaping. So a lot of times there is actually a home in my neighborhood that has 6 different types of driveway materials that they use. And I always laugh when I drive by or walk by. And so it can be a little distracting when you have too many things going on at once. So part of this tidy garden concept is just to, limit yourself a little bit. And so those are the pillars.
That's right. That's basically it. Well, that wasn't so bad for tidy garden advice. That's all doable. And it's good stuff, though, to be reminded of, too, because we do forget.
Right, and it will help you be a better gardener, I think, is the bottom line. Help your plants. They'll be healthier. You'll be happier.
Well, and along these lines, this leads right into the next trend, which is the whole clean gardening mantra for the fourth trend. And the number of people that are drawn to clean garden every year, I think, continues to grow. I kind of think about it in the same way I think we used to think about soda or pop. It was so prevalent when I was growing up. And now, my kids just are not drinking pop in the same way that, that we did. And of course, I said pop because I'm in the Midwest here, but I know some other people say soda, but you know what I'm saying.
What you're talking about.
Yeah, it's going by the wayside. I think when people are learning more that there are other methods and there is so much information out there, then, they're willing to give those things a try. So why don't you define this area for us, this trend, and then share some of the ways that we can make our garden safer for our families, pets, and the environment.
Yes, absolutely. You are 100% on, and I'm so happy. With a 2-year-old, I'm so happy to hear you say that soda is not so popular anymore.
No.
Yeah, although we're doing potty training right now, and we do use a treat for potty training, but I'm sure that will pass.
Of course, yes. We used to keep a little jar of Skittles in the bathroom. I know this is so disgusting, but that's where they were. We had to have
and you
that
don't
reward.
do it anymore, right?
No,
that's
my gosh. We're all done with it, Katie. Yes, we're all done.
So, but like you said, the demand with all the information, it is now impossible to ignore. And so this demand for clean food is something that's here to stay. I don't see that as a trend. Sometimes we see things such as fairy gardening. Some would say, some might argue, but that it has come, it reached its peak, and now it's sort of waning. Clean gardening is not something like that. It is here to stay. The labels, cage-free, pesticide-free, GMO-free. Mm-hmm. People are demanding to know where their food comes from.
Yes.
And what's in it. So, clean and gardening, they're not words that typically go together. Our profession is not so clean, which I love about it. But in this sense, it means using only products that come from natural origin. So you're trying to only grow or put in the ground things that are natural, organic, no synthetic.
Yes.
So, and there are a lot of companies that are doing a really great job at this. One company, the Espoma Organic Company, launched a program last year called Safe Paws. And the reason that they did that was because behind Christmas, the number one thing that Americans spend their money on is
pets.
Our pets, exactly. Our little four-legged friends. We love them more than anything.
Yeah.
And so, again, like trying to relate trees to our skin, we try to relate the health of people's pets to their lawns. It is the number one place that we've put way too many chemicals in the gardens. And, I know people love their lawns. Americans love their lawns. We're not here to tell you to get rid of your lawn, but it's just learning and being educated about the hazards of the things that you're putting in your garden, on your lawn, that then are somehow absorbed into either 4 paws, 2 feet, somehow getting into your bodies and into your homes, and just educating people about that. And as we know, knowledge is power, and that will really help people make better decisions.
Yes. Well, and you had a term in last year's report that I hadn't heard before called dogscaping, where you're actually planning spaces with your pets in mind.
Well, yeah, because dogs and cats can ruin gardens. And certainly there are some plants that are not good for them. And so you want to make a space where you're both happy, where your animals can run around and run free and dig, and then they're not, ruining your plants as well. So dogscaping and another one, catios, were very popular. Yep,
catios.
The old catio.
I love that. Well, the 5th trend, Uberizing gardening, made me laugh because I just started ordering my groceries through Amazon's 2-hour delivery.
That's amazing.
It's insane. I order my groceries, and in less than 2 hours, they're here, and it feels so powerful and magical because they just show up. And I've even tested them. I order things like ice cream, or I'll order something, really crazy like a power cord for something, or or a printer cartridge, and I'm getting my ice cream and my everything. It's all together, and it's just here so quickly. I can't believe it. And modern conveniences like these are really impacting our lives. And your report says it's going to be showing up in an area that people might not anticipate, and that's the world of gardening. Because you see big changes thanks to things like subscription services and on-demand gardening services. So these things are really going to change the way we garden, aren't they?
Yes. And this is the one that I was talking about before. This is my favorite trend because I am guilty of having subscription boxes. I haven't tried Amazon's grocery delivery, but I will certainly now. But I have a food subscription box. I have a clothing subscription box. I have tried the bark box for my dog. I don't need to spoil my dog that much, but I've tried a number of these. And, you know, experts say in the next 2 years, people will have an average of 8 subscription services.
Really?
So that's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of subscription services that we are getting on a monthly basis.
Wow.
And so, you know, like your example, it's not, they used to say the world's at our fingertips, but it's not necessarily that anymore. Now it's racing towards our front door, and we don't even need to leave the house.
That's right. Yep.
So, you know, for gardening, to me, it's a no-brainer. But, you know, I'm sure, have you heard of the 2 biggest reasons people don't garden? You know what they are?
Have no idea.
Time and knowledge.
And knowledge.
It's been a forever. You know, we've always had a conflict, whether it's golf or whether it's soccer, taking kids to soccer practice. Time is one of our biggest challenges that people don't garden. And then second is knowledge. And this delivery model can solve both of those. And so it's so similar to the food model. People don't know what to cook and they don't know how to cook it. So our model is exactly the same. It can offer a simple and convenient service if you're a beginner. Or, you know, a lot of companies are trying to attract millennials, this buzzword, to their company. And if, you know, a lot of people just don't know how to get started. And they can be overwhelmed. There's so many choices, and they just don't know. And so when you get a simple box with a couple products and instructions, it makes it a lot easier. Plus, they offer an experienced gardener, someone, you know, like you or I, who we know a little bit about what we're doing.
Yes.
We don't need to have beginner knowledge, but boy, would I love some unique plants or the opportunity to try, you know, a variety that I hadn't tried before, or be a test market for a company. So there really is a lot of opportunity in our industry, and there are very few people doing it. There are a few seed delivery services, but besides that, it's not the whole gamut. And so there are so many industries. You know, we call it Uberizing because of the popularity of the taxi type of, you know, just call and they're there. But almost every industry is getting in the game. When I was researching this one, healthcare, they're having subscription healthcare. So it's just every industry is here, and it's time for gardening to get involved.
Well, and I love that you point out the link between gardening and cooking, because if we can tap into that, it's just such a natural, you know, connection. You know, if Blue Apron were to have a gardening division, and they'll send you the seeds so you can grow your lettuce for the salad that they want you to make, that would be fantastic. Yes,
exactly. I mean, it's just, you know, you don't want to ask the kids, this is an old example, but when you ask kids where French fries come from and they say McDonald's, we need to make sure people know where their food is coming from, and food and gardening are so tied together.
Yeah. Well, and also, too, I love that you pointed out the knowledge barrier, because having more knowledge about gardening makes it easier. And that ties into the whole time barrier, because if you know better, you do better. So spreading the word on things that you can do, steps that you can take to make gardening easier, I think will go a long way to helping people break through those barriers and try gardening.
Because if they have success, then they'll do it again next year.
That's right.
If they don't have success, they probably won't.
Well, and it may mean that they're done, that they'll never do it again because they're like, this was a disaster. So,
right. It's no fun killing something.
No, it isn't. It reminds me of the time that I built a retaining wall, a very long, like a 25-foot retaining wall with my husband when we were first married. We got into such a huge fight out there. We started this project Memorial Day, and we ended on Labor Day. And I remember we were standing on this wall, getting into a big fight. We were newlyweds, and we went down to the basement. We lived in a split-level house, and we were both laying on the ground. And I said, because it was so hot, and of course, the basement's cool. And we're laying there, and I'm like, why were we fighting? I can't even remember now. And he's like, I don't know. He goes, but I do know this. We will never do something like this on our own again. And from now on, we'll hire it done. And I think people can have a similar experience with gardening. If it goes disastrously, then they're like, that's it. I can't do it, and we're over it.
Yep.
Yeah.
True.
Yep. So, trend 6 is a little sassy. And you call it buzz off. And I first thought it was going to be about pollinators. I'm like, okay, here we go. I happen to live in Minnesota. We've got Marla Spivak at the University of Minnesota leading the charge on pollinators. So I hear this all the time. And I thought, this is going to be in the trends report. But it's not about pollinators. This is about mosquitoes. And I was so happy this made your trend report because it is a very important issue. Earlier this year, I know we're recording in August, but back in July, I got a mosquito bite that rapidly turned into an infection. So not thinking about Zika, not thinking about all the infectious diseases that you can get, but just a simple, insect bite that can turn very serious quickly. I mean, insect bites are a big deal. And I have a new appreciation for that after going from being able to walk to 24 hours later, not being able to walk and scared to death I was going to end up in the hospital. I could not believe it. This past summer, Mike McGrath talked to Dr. Fonseca from Rutgers University on his show, and she talked about things like protective clothing and bug repellent and environmental measures that you can take to manage mosquitoes. So, for example, you can use lemon eucalyptus as a bug repellent and also treat containers of standing water with BTI to kill mosquito offspring. But tell us a little bit about some of the things that you think people should be doing as part of getting on board with this trend, buzz off.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you had that first impression because we did want a little bit of play on words. And we have talked about pollinators, in 5 of the last 6 of our trends reports. And in no way do I, first let me say, I don't want to diminish Marla or any of the people's work. And, pollinators are still important. We want to make sure, we talked about the peak of trends, that protecting pollinators is here to stay. I think that is something that is at the forefront of people's minds. And so they're important. But you're right, this is not that. There are bugs we don't want in the garden. So, we talked about what we want, but now there are bugs we don't want. And mosquitoes are public enemy number 1 because, like you said, of Zika. And so right now, the answer so far has been chemical sprays, or I've heard of this new GMO killer mosquito that they're releasing in Florida. So, those options are options, but we don't know what the long-term results of those will be. Are we trading one problem for another?
That's right.
And there are natural solutions. So, like you said, bats can eat an average of 1,000 mosquitoes per hour. So we were going to call this trend Batman to the rescue, but the more research we did, we saw that chickens are also really popular mosquito eaters, and and other birds. Now they can't 100% solve the problem for you, but there are so many other natural ways to repel mosquitoes and other bugs. Many plants emit chemicals. We talked about a bug repellent garden near your seeding area. Citronella and lavender, those types of plants will emit chemicals into the air and soil that repel bugs. So there are natural repellents. We just need to make sure that people are educated on what they are to make sure that you're not using those chemical sprays that then in turn harm those beneficial pollinators.
Yes. That's right. Well, and it is a very scary area. I mean, right as we're recording this, the Olympics are taking place in Rio.
Absolutely.
And there are athletes that didn't go down. I know Savannah
Yep.
Guthrie at NBC did not go down there because
Yep.
she's pregnant and she did
Yep.
not want to get Zika. I don't blame her.
No, me neither. And actually, I'm expecting right now, too, and all summer, it's been something that has been a really big fear of mine, and it's a simple mosquito bite.
Yeah.
But, it's something that we don't necessarily worry about in our country. We're very lucky to not have to worry about these kinds of diseases. But when it does come here, it makes us realize and open our eyes.
Well, that's absolutely correct. Well, the last trend of your report is all about creating a gardening culture in the United States, and you call it gardening love. In this trend, you put the spotlight on two major organizations that are committed to uniting industry professionals, scientists, folks at extension services, and NGOs to increase awareness that gardening is important to creating a healthy life, a healthy community, and a healthy world. Why don't we profile each of these? And the first is the National Initiative for Consumer Horticulture. Introduce us to this group.
Yes, well, we like to say niche for short.
Niche.
Because that's quite a mouthful. Yes, niche. And niche is a new group. It's in its infancy. But the aim, like you said, it brings together all aspects of the industry, which is something that hasn't happened before. A lot of times we each individually, the government has tried to promote horticulture, or a nonprofit has tried to do it, or industry. There's a lot of industry campaigns. Just Plant Something is one of them that have tried to promote the benefits and value of horticulture. But we think that by bringing all of these organizations together, it creates a unified voice. And the goal of niche is to cultivate a passion and appreciation for plants. And, just the people to appreciate the trees, just walk by a plant and look at its pretty little face. And in doing so, will increase demand, and that will raise the whole industry. So that really is the goal of niche, is just to cultivate that passion and appreciation.
And the second is Seed Your Future. And I love that this organization is focused on exciting youth about careers in horticulture, because we need that. What's the vision here?
Yes, well, this is a very forward-thinking organization, because it is not about, there are jobs to be had in our industry right now. There are jobs to be filled that do not have qualified people to fill them. And so because of that, a number of people in the industry said, well, we need to teach people that this is a viable career opportunity. And so what they are doing is they're visiting, everything from second grade into high school. And so this is nurturing that age group to get excited about a career in horticulture, put a face to the people who have these careers, and let them know that horticulture is invaluable. Horticulture is life. Without plants, there is no planet. There are no people. And so to really excite people about that, kids about that, and nurture this next generation of people who will be taking up the mantle, taking care of us, taking care of our planet, and again, making our industry much more relevant.
Well, and there are places that people can go online to find out more about Niche and Seed Your Future, right?
Yeah, so Niche's website is consumerhort.org, and Seed Your Future is seedyourfuture.org.
Okay. Well, in the time we have left, why don't we wrap up by having you tell us how we can find more information about the 2017 Garden Trends Report if people want a copy of it, and also how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. So our Trends Report is available on our website, which is gardenmediagroup.com, and there's a little tab at the top called Trends, and you will see that beautiful picture of succulents when you click on it, and you can download the report there. It's quite a hefty report, so emailing it is just not practical, so people can download it on their own. And then people can find me either through our Facebook page, or I'm on Twitter, or you can email me directly at katie@gardenmediagroup.com. If you have any questions, or certainly post them on your Facebook group. I will be interacting and answering any questions. And you also said for people to use a hashtag, Garden Trends, and I love use Grow365 as well. And whatever trends you're seeing out there, please do share them, and we will share yours as well.
All right. That sounds fantastic. And you are going to give a giveaway to a lucky listener.
Yes. One of the things that we love about our Trends Report is it encompasses so many things. So what we came up with was a little gift pack that kind of covers a number of things in the trends. And so it would just be a little bit of a representation of our 2017 trends, a little piece from each, a little sample prize pack of something that will represent 2017.
Well, I love that. Well, Katie, I want to thank you for your time today. This was spectacular. We got a chance to go through the entire trend report, and we'll also be looking for these trends as we garden through 2017.
Exactly. Please do. This was a lot of fun, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Katie. Well, that's it for the show today. I want to thank Katie Dubow of the Garden Media Group for being my guest and taking us through the exciting world of garden trends and the Garden Trends Report for 2017 with the theme Grow 365. Now, don't forget, if you spot something that you think is a garden trend and you want to let Katie and her team know about it, make sure you use the hashtag Garden Trend or Garden Trends Report. And I know that Katie and her group will find it and they will incorporate it into their research for next year's trends. And also, don't forget to use the hashtag Grow365 when you encounter the trends that we reviewed today. Well, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions for helping me put the show together every single week. David Myers, Ein Kadena, and David Gregerson, and also my podcast production assistant, Taylor Davey. And just a reminder that I'll have all of the generous information that Katie shared on the show today over at my website at 6footmama.com. That's the number 6ftmama.com. That's the home of the Still Growing podcast, and you can find links that were shared on the show today, as well as other episodes. So if you're interested in going through the back catalog, you can certainly do that over on my website at 6footmama.com. Well, next week, Anna Thomas of the cookbook Vegan, Vegetarian, Omnivore returns to the show, and she's walking us through holiday menu ideas for gardeners, for hosts, for cooks. She's got some great ideas for our holiday parties and gatherings this year. So if you want to get a leg up on your entertaining and your get-togethers with family and friends this year, that'll be a great show to listen to. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Have a great week. Still Growing with Jennifer Ebling is a 6footmama.com production made in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. Still Growing is a weekly gardening podcast dedicated to helping you and your garden grow.